Was Roy Orbison pushed over the edge by exhaustion? Most fans remember him as the mysterious figure in shades possessing a voice that defined an era. Yet, beneath those mournful melodies and his iconic status, lay a path paved with crushing heartbreaks. Following the tragic loss of his spouse and children, he relentlessly chased the spotlight despite his sorrow. The industry went silent in December 1988 when a sudden coronary event claimed the star at 52 years old. Decades later, followers still wonder if the combination of professional stress and personal agony finally broke his spirit. The truth about Orbison is far more complex and painful than the public image ever let on. While the industry eventually hailed Roy Orbison as a creative genius, his path to the top started in a very humble place. Born in Vernon, Texas, on April 23, 1936, he grew up while the country was still reeling from the Depression. His dad, Orbie Lee, chased oilfield work whenever it appeared, but his mum, Nadine, possessed a flair for the arts. Her affinity for painting and poetry quietly planted the seeds for Roy's future as a melodic storyteller. Even with the pressure of providing, his father fully backed the boy's budding fascination with musical instruments. On his 6th birthday, Roy received a guitar from his father, a moment that set his entire future in motion. The guitar hooked Roy immediately, and he learned fast from his dad and big brother. Being a Texas kid, falling for local music was just bound to happen. Country and western swing grabbed hold of him, with legends like Jimmy Rogers and Lefty Frizzell shaping his voice. Before long, people realized he had something special. Roy was already hitting the stage by the time he was 9. While staying with his grandma in Vernon, he crushed a talent contest on KVVWC radio. He even landed his own weekly show, which was massive for a kid his age. Even with those first wins, Roy felt pretty insecure, mostly because his clunky spectacles and white blonde hair made him stick out like a sore thumb. He was a loner who often dismissed the compliments he received regarding his incredible range. Roy figured his singing was just okay, nothing special, even as his peers raved. Regardless, his drive to play never wavered. By 1949, he formed the Wink Westerners with some schoolmates, gigging at local watering holes and radio stations. After banking $400 from a single dance, the realization hit him. A professional life in music was finally on the table, although young Roy Orbison viewed himself as just a guitarist when he first picked up the instrument. That changed around age 15, when he realized his true calling was behind the microphone. Over time, those massive pipes became his main draw while the guitar took a back seat, but he still couldn't shake the feeling that music was a risky gamble. Because he grew up during a rough era, Roy wanted a safety net, so he mirrored his dad by studying geology at North Texas State College in 1954, eyeing a future in the oil business. He kept gigging with the Wink Westerners throughout his school days, though he was constantly torn between a steady paycheck and his musical ambitions. The game changed when his buddy Pat Boone scored a record deal and became an overnight sensation. All at once, making it big in music felt possible, especially after the Wink Westerners split in 1955 and fresh doors began to swing wide open. Roy joined forces with old pals James Morrow and Billy Pat Ellis to start the Teen Kings, eventually bringing in a few more guys to round out the lineup. Their big moment arrived with Ooby Dooby, a high-energy track penned by college friends. They initially dropped the single on the Jewel label in 1956. Believing the song had more potential, the group bought back their rights to pitch it to major players. It was a smart move. They soon hit Memphis to recut the track at the famous Sun Records. Sam Phillips, the man who started it all, loved their sound and immediately put them on his roster. This period marked a massive, unforeseen shift in Orbison's creative path and career trajectory. While cutting tracks at Sun Records with the Teen Kings, Roy's artistic focus began to drift. That western swing vibe that started his career just wasn't clicking with him anymore. Even with Sam Phillips pushing for that signature rockabilly energy made famous by Elvis, Roy was pulled toward a different soul. He craved the slow, gut-wrenching ballads that let his powerhouse voice take the lead. Behind the scenes, the group's foundation was hitting a breaking point. They were sharing the stage with legends like Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash, but the Teen Kings were still flat broke. Scraping by on mere pennies only made the internal friction within the group reach a boiling point. His bandmates started resenting him, eventually labeling Roy as a high-maintenance and arrogant ego tripper. Things finally boiled over. Roy was increasingly viewed as the main attraction, a sentiment echoed by several industry insiders. When the band found out he planned to put his name in the title, they reached their limit. Everyone quit on the spot, leaving Roy alone. By the end of 1956, the group was history, but his troubles were just beginning. Without a band and with no money coming in, his financial situation became truly desperate. Sun Records struggled to find his solo identity, leaving him with few recording options. To survive, he hit the road, playing any gig that would pay. He tried a stripped-down acoustic session in 1957, hoping to reinvent himself as a solo act. Regrettably, every single record flopped, and the constant disappointment made him doubt he'd ever be a star. But even as his professional dreams seemed to be dying, his personal world was reaching new milestones. Later that year, he relocated to Odessa, Texas, with his 16-year-old sweetheart, Claudette. The two of them had a long history and soon tied the knot. Then, in 1958, they welcomed their first boy, Roy Jr. Even with a growing family, his musical prospects remained bleak, and his path forward was totally obscured. By 1960, he was nearly finished with the industry. Burnout hit him hard after years of spinning his wheels, killing any desire to hit the studio. He tried sticking it out at small-time Texas joints for a bit, but even those gigs went stale by 1958, prompting him to hang up the mic for good. Nevertheless, he could not just walk away from his craft entirely. Despite his bitter feelings toward the industry, Roy's drive to write music never truly flickered out. The following year saw him join forces with Acuff Rose Music, a powerhouse known for churning out country hits for the stars. This period marked a turning point as he bonded with producer Wesley Rose, frequently pitching him fresh demo tapes. That bridge he built ended up changing everything. After spinning Roy's tapes for a few months, Wesley Rose put in a good word with Fred Foster over at Monument Records. By 1960, Roy had inked a deal with the label, finally getting his ticket back into the recording booth. His collaboration with singer Joe Melson, which kicked off during his Acuff Rose days, stayed strong even after he switched teams. Their creative sparks flew, resulting in a track titled "Only the Lonely Know the Way I Feel." It was a total outlier for the era, mixing symphonic elements and doo-wop harmonies with Roy's soaring, high-pitched vocals. Taking that risk turned into a massive win. Roy actually cut the vocal himself after getting the cold shoulder from both Elvis Presley and the Everly Brothers. The moment "Only the Lonely" hit the airwaves, it blew up, turning a struggling writer into a household name practically overnight. Yet, making it big brought a whole new set of headaches. With his career finally in overdrive, he dove straight back into the grind of life on the road, quickly dropping his follow-up track, Blue Angel. As his star continued to rise, the grueling tour schedule started tearing at the seams of his personal world. His wife, Claudette, was stuck at home raising their little boy while Roy vanished for weeks at a time, sparking rumors that their marriage was on thin ice. Roy Orbison was not the type of artist to just sit still. Even with a few hits under his belt, he started worrying that his new tracks were starting to sound like broken records. Pushing to break out of the pop mold, he penned a heavy rock ballad in 1961 called Running Scared. The lyrics were a bit on the nose, detailing a man's paralyzing fear that he'd lose his girl to another guy. The day they recorded it became a legendary moment in music history. Facing a massive orchestra, he had to belt it out just to be heard over the sea of instruments. His voice cracked twice while chasing a brutal high note. Rather than playing it safe, Roy went for broke on the next take, hitting a natural high A so perfectly it left everyone in the room speechless. That god-tier voice quickly turned him into a global sensation. After Running Scared hit #1 on the Billboard charts, Roy kept the momentum going with a string of chart toppers. His newfound fame opened doors for massive tours across the globe. While traveling through Australia, a local radio personality dubbed him the Big O, a nod to the explosive finales of his heart-wrenching songs. Around that time, his family life was expanding too. After settling Claudette and their firstborn in a Nashville suburb, they celebrated the arrival of their second boy, Anthony King, in 1962. Still, the job kept him away from the dinner table more often than not. In 1963, he headed across the pond to tour with a fresh group of kids called the Beatles. Roy did not really get the hype surrounding them at first. During a moment of annoyance, he supposedly asked what a Beatle even was, only for John Lennon to tap his shoulder and joke that he was looking at one. Any awkwardness faded fast as the tour became a total smash. British fans were just as obsessed with Roy as they were with the Fab Four, often screaming for encore after encore. The initial friction melted away, and Roy bonded with the group, who had actually been huge fans of his work for years. But while his professional life was soaring, his world at home was quietly falling apart. Like so many icons who lived out of a suitcase, Roy Orbison saw his private life start to crumble under the pressure. The endless months apart and the weight of the spotlight took a heavy toll on his relationship with Claudette. Whispers started getting louder about Roy's various flings while he was away on tour. In 1963, Claudette found a letter from one of his mistresses, a discovery that cut her to the core. Feeling isolated and double-crossed, she ended up starting an affair with the contractor who built their family home. At first, Roy did not suspect a thing. Every time he came back from a tour, Claudette acted like everything was fine. It is a strange twist of fate that one of his greatest songs was born right in the middle of this chaos. During a 1964 writing session with Bill Dees, Claudette popped in for a second. Roy asked her if she had some cash on her before she left. Dees cracked a joke about how a beautiful woman never needs to pay for anything, and that one line birthed the idea for "Oh, Pretty Woman." That track turned into a monster hit, topping charts in both the States and the United Kingdom while moving over 7 million copies. Even with the massive success of the song, his marriage to Claudette was still circling the drain. Later that year, the truth about her affair finally came to light. Even though Roy was not exactly a saint himself, finding out she cheated absolutely crushed him. They ended up signing divorce papers the next year. But as it turned out, they could not quite quit each other. Following the birth of their third son, Wesley, in 1965, they decided to give it another shot. Meanwhile, Roy's career was beginning to hit some rough water. The British invasion, spearheaded by groups like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, completely flipped the script on what was popular. Roy kept putting out records, but nothing managed to capture that lightning in a bottle like his early hits. Sadly, the worst was yet to come. Both Roy and Claudette were huge fans of motorcycles, a hobby they supposedly picked up from Elvis. That shared love for the road, however, would end in disaster. On June 6, 1966, while they were out riding together, Claudette collided with a truck. She was rushed to the ER but passed away from the impact at only 25 years old. To deal with the gut-wrenching grief, Roy threw himself entirely into his work. He ended up signing a deal with MGM Studios to produce film scores and even take on some acting roles. His first movie, The Fastest Guitar Alive, became a distraction from his pain. Unfortunately, the film bombed with critics and at the box office, leading the studio to scrap his remaining projects. As the decade wore on, Roy's presence in movies and music began to fade into the background, yet the most painful chapter of his story had not even been written. By the late 1960s, the sound Roy Orbison championed had largely gone out of style. The musical world was moving at a breakneck pace. With the British invasion and the counterculture movement taking over, audiences shifted their focus to wilder performers like Jimi Hendrix. Roy's theatrical style felt like a relic next to the raw edge of the Doors or the Rolling Stones. Career slumps paled in comparison to the nightmare that struck next. Late in 1968, while on the road in the United Kingdom, Roy got a phone call that changed everything. A massive fire consumed his home in Tennessee, taking the lives of his two oldest boys, Roy and Anthony. It was an unbearable blow. Still reeling from his wife's passing 2 years prior, this latest disaster left him completely broken and drained of any desire to keep performing. Eventually, Roy tried to pick up the pieces, finding a spark with a young woman named Barbara while traveling abroad. Things got serious between them, leading to a wedding in 1969. They went on to have 2 boys, Roy Jr. in 1970 and Alexander in 1975. His parents took over the upbringing of his first son, Wesley, but as the 1970s came to a close, Roy's physical health began to betray him. A 1977 vacation in Hawaii took a dark turn when doctors found life-threatening blockages in his heart. Medical staff couldn't believe he was still breathing given his state. To stay alive, he went under the knife for open heart surgery in January of 1978. Even after that brush with death, kicking old habits proved difficult. Though American fans had largely moved on by the early 80s, international crowds still worshipped his sound. Places like Bulgaria treated him like the superstar he'd been in his prime. No matter how much his popularity fluctuated, his impact on the industry never missed a beat. By the late 80s, the world was finally giving Roy the credit he'd earned decades prior. 1987 brought 2 massive career wins. He earned his spot in both the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The boss himself, Bruce Springsteen, gave the induction speech, hailing Roy's incredible vocal range as a blueprint for rock stars. Right then, he joined forces for a project that would become absolute legend. Everything clicked during a casual lunch with rock icons Jeff Lynne and George Harrison. That meal turned into a band meeting that eventually pulled in Tom Petty and Bob Dylan. The Traveling Wilburys were born, a group that threw the standard industry rules out the window. Forget about chasing clout or outdoing each other. George Harrison prioritized personal chemistry over professional status. These legends treated the collaboration like a playground, prioritizing laughs and creative liberty over commercial pressure. The band members all used funny pseudonyms to keep things light. Roy picked Lefty Wilbury as a nod to his idol, Lefty Frizzell. Everyone in that circle held Roy in the highest possible regard. Even though all 5 guys were absolute titans of the industry, they were still captivated by the magic of Roy's vocals. Jeff Lynne mentioned that the atmosphere would shift whenever Roy performed, effectively silencing every person in the building. It felt like a glorious second act for the Big O, but the clock was ticking faster than anyone knew. Just as he finished the 1988 album Mystery Girl, his body started sending warning signals. He mentioned feeling sharp chest pressure and splitting headaches, which likely stemmed from a grueling European circuit of concerts and media appearances. Co-workers could tell he was hurting, but Roy refused to slow down or cancel a single show. His calendar was packed tight, including a final gig in Ohio on December 4th, 1988. Following the performance, he headed back to his place in Hendersonville, Tennessee, to relax before a scheduled trip to London with the traveling Wilburys. He was also mapping out a major international tour for the coming year. On December 6th, he spent a quiet afternoon running errands with his longtime friend Benny. He spent the day hunting for model aircraft parts, a favorite pastime of his. That evening, he dined at the Birchfield residence and later dropped by his mum's house to chat with his son Wesley. While there, Roy stepped away for a moment and never emerged, only to be found unconscious 30 minutes later. Despite emergency efforts, a heart attack claimed him at just 52 years old. Friends and family gathered a few days later in Tennessee to say their first goodbyes to the legend. 48 hours later, his widow Barbara hosted a tribute in Los Angeles for friends and colleagues to honor his memory. They buried the legend at the Westwood Village Memorial Park. Despite a life defined by sorrow, Roy's journey concluded with one last massive victory. His final masterpiece, Mystery Girl, blew up after he was gone, becoming a career-defining hit. The record hit number 5 on the charts, his best solo performance ever, ensuring that his iconic sound would remain etched in the world's heart forever.